Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Killers of the Flower Moon comes to us from director Martin Scorsese. The movie is listed at 3.5 hours, but we actually found it's about 3:20. Not that it makes it a whole lot better, like a whole lot easier to take on, but I feel like going into this movie, we kind of went into it with a little bit of trepidation just because of that length, right?
It's very long. It seems very long. It doesn't feel that long when you're watching it.
It doesn't, but I feel like when you go into a movie, I don't want to say dreading it because I was excited for this movie. It's Martin Scorsese, Leonardo DiCaprio. It's the 10th film
De Niro.
he's done with De Niro. So we were both excited going into it. You read the book, I didn't. But I feel like a bit of it was just like, oh my gosh, I got to prepare myself to take on this mental load of this movie. But let's get into what this movie is about. And again, I know it's based on true events. It's based on the book. But I don't want to give away the details that you learn about watching this movie because I think just the way you take on this story is very valuable to knowing nothing, really a whole lot going into it that the trailer didn't give us. So that's all we'll speak about on the plot of the movie. But it takes place in the 1920s. The members of the Osage Native American tribe were being murdered. And the reason why is because they were living on this land that was essentially described as the worst land ever. But they found out that there was oil on this land. So suddenly this land...
a lot of oil.
Suddenly this land that was so terrible was now so valuable because there was oil on it. And all the members of the Osage tribe got rich. Really, really rich. In the movie, at the beginning, it described them as like the highest... or the
income per capita.
And it's incredible that they just are able to now live this entirely different lifestyle. They have all this fancy jewelry, fancy cars. And the roles are reversed in this town in Oklahoma, where now these people who have been, stuck in this situation where they didn't really have a whole lot of money, a whole lot of power, now they were the ones with the most power and the most money. And a lot of people living there who weren't a part of the tribe didn't like it. They wanted that power back. They wanted that money. They feel like they didn't earn that money. So there was this dynamic that shifted. And where there is money, there's going to be corruption because you have the character played by Robert De Niro who is trying to get that money. And you have Leonardo DiCaprio's character who plays his nephew who comes back from war and he loves money. That's his entire character trait in this movie. He just loves money. But then you have this family who at the center of it all is Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, who was my favorite part of this entire movie.
Blew me away. Incredible. Give her the Oscar now.
And her family has a substantial amount of money. And the way that people in this community who are not a part of the Osage tribe are trying to get their money is essentially mixing all their families together. So what you have in this movie, it's the story of how these group of people led by Robert De Niro try to take their money. What ends up happening is all these murders start going down and there's no investigation.
Nothing.
Like, it's crazy. These people are dying.
Being like brutally murdered. And there is just like like that's how the town responded to it.
Where it's a clear connection that it's because of their money. Essentially, it is why the FBI was created. But man, I would say the way to describe this movie and its entire plot was kind of what they said in the trailer, which is my favorite line of the entire movie.
Can you find the wolves in this picture?
Can you find the wolves in this picture is essentially what this movie is about, where you have all these people living in this community who all seem to be friends to the Osage tribe, but behind their back, they're not their friends whatsoever, and they just want their money. So I think that is the overarching kind of theme of this movie. Can you trust these people? Can you pick out the wolves that are really just after you for your money? And I think I really love that part of the movie, of discovering the story I really didn't know a whole lot about and really becoming angry because there's so many things that go wrong in this movie and there's so much exploitation that I found myself getting so angry about this, where you just want something to be done. How did you feel after reading the book and then seeing the film?
Okay, without giving too much away, we will also do a spoiler.
Oh yeah, we have to go spoiler, but we'll keep this part spoiler free. But as far as just the comparison in the two, without giving a whole lot away.
Okay, I gave the book 4.5 stars when I reviewed it on my Goodreads, and I'll just go ahead and give my film review now. I would give it 4 stars. I deduct half a star because the movie goes off course a little from the book, and that there's a pretty big plot line in the movie that you're introduced to, whereas in the book that unfolds slower and you don't know towards the end. The book also goes into a lot more detail about like the creation of the FBI, which I thought was really interesting, but I get that didn't really serve the plot of the movie. I think the book is it's hands down better because it's a lot more investigative rather than storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought the movie was great. I really loved the movie, but I'm glad that I read the book first. And I think you could still read the book after seeing the movie. I think things will unfold differently and you get a fuller picture of the story. But yeah, the book is told in 3 acts as well. The first, or I guess it's called like 3 books. Book 1 is the story of all the murders. Book 2 is creation of the FBI and the investigation unfolding. And then book 3 is David Gran talking about his research. And he actually, I think this is really cool. And if you're not watching this on video, sorry, this won't be interesting. But he has like an entire section in the back of like this many pages of all of the research that he did to write this book.
A lot of research.
I thought that was really interesting.
I thought that the casting was really great in this movie.
Oh, the casting was phenomenal.
And the interesting casting I found was all the country artists who were in this movie. You had Sturgill Simpson.
Jason Isbell.
Who was a lot more prominent than I was expecting.
Yeah, he was
essentially throughout this entire film.
I would say a second-tier character.
Then you had Randy Houser with this small cameo in this movie. But just to be able to say you're in a Scorsese movie, no matter how big or small of a part you have, I think is pretty cool.
Jesse Plemons was phenomenal. He is one of those actors that I wouldn't have expected years ago when he was on Friday Night Lights to explode like he has, but he is so freaking good.
I mean, he probably has a great agent getting him great role, but he is a great actor at the core of it.
Great actor.
But I feel like he has so many big roles in like movies that end up being Oscar-nominated movies, which this one, without a doubt, will for sure go on to be. But the same guy from Game Night is also in Killers of the Flower Moon, also having very poignant lines.
Listen, one of my favorite roles that he's done is the cop in Game Night.
How could that be profitable for Frito-Lay? Yes, I love him in that movie. But I did think having the country artists cast in this movie, it was a nice touch because Scorsese and his casting director always try to have like that unique casting of like, why is this person in this movie? But it's interesting.
And then Jack White.
Oh, yeah, Jack White.
Which I had a theory. I was like, are any of them from Oklahoma? They're from 4 different states. That theory was just gone
I think they were just trying to find some off-the-wall casting, and I think it works the most part. I will say, like, you can kind of tell how they're not really actors. I felt it a little bit. I feel like...
I didn't notice it that much.
A little bit with Jason Isbell. No, probably more so with Sturgill Simpson, to be honest.
Jason Isbell's character was also just supposed to be weird.
He was a weird guy.
And I don't want to explain why he's weird, but you'll watch it and you'll be like, that's a very odd character.
I would say with Sturgill Simpson, I was very aware in some of his scenes that he was acting and not just being fully engulfed in that role. But I would say this movie sucks you in from the very beginning to the point that it hit about the hour and 15 mark and it went by so fast that I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to be bored in this movie. I also drink a lot of coffee, so I didn't want to doze off in this movie because of the length. But it does suck you in. And about at that hour and 15-minute mark, I literally made a note that I was giving this movie a 5 out of 5 because it was just going and going and going. And the cinematography in this movie is unmatched. I love the way that they actually filmed it in Oklahoma, and you really feel like you're there. I think that is a big part of this movie. It just all really comes down to how this movie was framed and the direction. But also with things like the hair, makeup, and wardrobe, like to take somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio and make him look so different and really be able to elevate his character because he's a great actor. But the movie had just some unruly tension throughout the entire time. With every kill that happens, it's just like, I don't even count kills, with every brutal murder, you just feel it.
There's a few scenes I will say that are a little graphic. The whole thing is not graphic, but there are a few of the murders where you're just like, ugh.
That's kind of Scorsese's trademark of having just a really cut and dry murder where it just comes out of nowhere. It just happens, and it's very matter of the fact. And it's just pretty unsettling too.
There's one in particular that I will just say. So if you're a little like squeamish, just like when there's a murder, maybe just like look away for a second. Close your eyes.
That to say, I love the movie, and afterwards, after sitting in the theater for almost 3.5 hours, I felt differently than that 5 out of 5 I was giving it earlier. And I think it's because at the end of this movie, I realized that Scorsese didn't do a whole lot different than he's done in the past, which I think great directors always reinvent themselves. Guy is 80 years old now. He's not going to reinvent himself. And I think the story that he had to tell here, and he even did that thing at the very beginning of the movie where he's like, I've been wanting to tell the story for whatever amount of time. I'm glad you're here in the theater. I thought he was going to do something a little bit different. And I thought the movie was going to have a little bit different of a tone, but it almost felt like the same formula that he did back in the day with Goodfellas. That same rise and fall, focusing on a couple of actors that aren't even members of the Osage tribe and telling their story of really just another crime epic that he's told before. I kind of wanted him to do something different. I wanted more of the Osage story.
Which you get in
there.
The book.
But I guess with having to make an epic that's 3.5 hours long, he had to tell it in a way and from a perspective that he could, reach that runtime.
And also keep people engaged. Because I will say my one note about the book, the reason I only gave it a 4.5 instead of a 5, is that it's a very slow start.
Mm-hmm.
Very slow. Like to the point where I was like, am I going to want to finish this book? And then once you get towards the end of like part 1 in the book and on to part 2, it's like, okay, I can't put this down. But I will say I kind of see why like the creative direction went the way it did in the movie, because you have to keep people engaged, because if they're bored in the first 30 minutes, they're going to leave. We've been there before.
Yeah, we've been
bored
there
in the
before.
first 30 minutes of a movie. We're like, it's not getting any better.
So from my 5, I took it down to a 4.5, and then it went down a little bit further because I did feel those 3.5 hours, even though it was entertaining. And I think the fact that it was based on a true story, that kind of hurt it a little bit for me, because if it was just a fictional story, I would have loved it. Probably would have given it a 5 out of 5, but I feel like he changed the perspective a little bit, and it took a little bit away from the impactfulness, and he kind of missed out on some other elements of the story that I wish he would have drove home a little bit more.
But I will say, too, you wouldn't have known that there were elements of that story if I hadn't read the book. So
Also
would that
true.
have changed your opinion? Because we got in the car, and I immediately was like,
I think so, too.
here's what changed. Here's what was different. Here's what I didn't like. So you
Because-
wouldn't, if you saw this movie, you didn't read the book, you didn't know anything, would you have given it a 5 out of 5?
No, because of the long runtime.
Okay.
I still wouldn't give it a 5 out of 5. Would have went to 4.5. But after hearing what you had to say about it and what we'll get into in the spoiler version of this review, I think I got to take it down to a 4 out of 5. And I also based it on his work. I don't always love to do that, but if you're thinking about Scorsese and putting it up against Goodfellas and The Departed and Taxi Driver and all the movies he has done that have really cemented him as one of the greatest directors of all time, I wouldn't even put it in the top 5 Scorsese films, so I couldn't give it a 5 out of 5 when Goodfellas will still be my favorite movie of his of all time. Right below that is Wolf of Wall Street. So it was close to getting there, but that 3.5 hours just really hurt my butt at the end of it. And I also think that hurts him in the long run too, because it made about $23 million opening weekend, which is decent. But I feel like having that long runtime is going to keep a lot of people away from even watching it in the first place. And even the fact that it's coming out on Apple in probably 45 days or so, I still think starting a movie that's 3.5 hours is going to keep a lot of people away from it too.
But Oppenheimer's 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that didn't feel the hurt at the box office, I don't feel like.
I feel like there's a big jump in something being 3 hours and 3.5. Mentally, I
It's
prepared myself
that
differently.
under 3.5.
I still think it's a factor here.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's still a really good movie, and one I highly encourage you to see for yourself and make your own judgment. It's not a bad movie by any means.
No,
There's
I mean,
nothing wrong with it. I just think when you look at all the aspects of it, there's some things I would have liked to have been done differently.
Agreed. And we'll talk about that in the spoiler
We'll
review.
do that in the
because
spoiler.
I have so much I want to say, but I can't.
So to recap, you give it a
4.
I also give it a 4. And I think Leonardo DiCaprio will probably pick up a Best Actor nomination. I don't think he'll win, even though he was really good. I don't think De Niro deserves one in this case. The only person I think deserves a nomination and deserves to win is Lily Gladstone.
Give her the Oscar.
Give her the Oscar. I would also like to see Jesse Plemons get nominated just because his role and his character was really good. And also that the fact that he just keeps putting out really good movies and really doing well with being kind of one of the quiet elite members of Hollywood.
I was going to say quiet power couple. Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst.
That is a good one.
A very quiet power couple.
But come back later this week and we'll give you our full spoiler version and talk about all the juicy details. But that is our Killers of the Flower Moon review.